4:30 a.m. on November the 23rd, 1951. Station Master Griffith Evans stood on the platform at Blaenau Ffestiniog and watched his world disappear. Snow had been falling for 14 hours. The narrow gauge tracks that carried slate from the quarries to the coast were gone. The signal posts were gone. The shed roofs sagged under weight they were never designed to bear. Evans had worked Welsh railways for 32 years. He had never seen snow in November like this. Standard procedure said wait for the ploughs from Porthmadog. Standard procedure assumed the ploughs could reach you. Evans picked up a shovel. In the next 72 hours, he and 43 other railwaymen would dig 16 miles of track by hand, moving an estimated 12,000 tons of snow, with tools built for summer maintenance. This is the story of how an early-season blizzard caught Britain's mountain railways unprepared, and how improvisation became the only doctrine that mattered. The weather forecast on November 22nd had called for light snow showers. Meteorologists at the Air Ministry noted a low-pressure system moving east from Ireland. Nothing exceptional. November snow in North Wales was unusual but not unheard of. The mountains around Snowdonia saw their first flakes most years in late December, sometimes early December, almost never before Thanksgiving. The Ffestiniog Railway didn't run winter equipment until December 1st. Policy. The narrow-gauge lines serving Penryn and Dinorwic quarries kept their ploughs in storage until the first week of December. The Great Western Railway maintained snow fences along exposed sections of the Cambrian coastline, but crews didn't inspect them until mid-December. Everyone followed the same calendar. Winter started in December. The storm didn't care about calendars. By 6 p.m. on November 22nd, Blaenau Ffestiniog had 4 inches of snow. By midnight, 11 inches. By 4 a.m., when Griffith Evans arrived for the early shift, 14 inches blanketed the town and the wind was building drifts that swallowed buildings. The barometric pressure had dropped to 970 millibars. Wind speeds at Snowdon summit reached 70 miles per hour. The temperature sat at 28 degrees Fahrenheit and falling. The Ffestiniog Railway ran 13.5 miles from Blaenau Ffestiniog down to Porthmadog on the coast. Narrow gauge, 2-foot track, built in 1836 to haul slate. By 1951 it carried passengers and kept the quarries connected to the world. 4 locomotives, 23 slate wagons, 11 passenger carriages, a workforce of 62 men who knew every curve and cutting between the mountains and the sea. None of them had ever worked a shovel in November. Thomas Pritchard ran the morning freight. He was supposed to depart Blaenau at 5:15 a.m, with 12 wagons of dressed slate bound for the coast. His locomotive Prince was a fairly double boiler built in 1863, 88 years old, still working. Pritchard found her buried to her buffer beams in the engine shed. The turntable was invisible. The water tower spout had frozen solid at 2 a.m. He got steam up anyway. Took him 90 minutes instead of 40. The fire wouldn't draw properly with snow blocking the chimney. Pritchard climbed onto the boiler and cleared it by hand, burning his gloves on the hot metal. By 7 a.m, Prince was ready. The track wasn't. Evans assembled 12 men. Track maintenance crew mostly, a few porters. One clerk who'd never held a shovel before. They started at the platform and worked east toward the first cutting. The snow was wet, heavy. Each shovelful weighed 15 to 20 pounds. They could clear maybe 10 feet of track per hour if they worked in rotation. The first cutting was 400 yards long and filled to a depth of 9 feet. 400 yards, 10 feet per hour. Mathematics that didn't care about cold hands or empty stomachs. They worked anyway. The problem wasn't just depth, it was density. The wind had packed the snow into drifts with the consistency of wet concrete. Shovels bounced off the surface. Men broke through the crust and sank to their waists. In the exposed sections, new snow filled in what they'd cleared before they finished the next section. Evans tried to organise a bucket brigade. Didn't work. The buckets froze. They went back to shovels and brute force. By 9 a.m, they'd cleared 200 feet. Prince sat in the shed with steam up and nowhere to go. Pritchard kept the fire burning because letting her cool down meant starting over. He burned through half a ton of coal waiting for track that might not be ready until tomorrow, or next week. The Penryn Railway had it worse. Their line ran from Bethesda to Port Penryn, 6 miles, steeper grades than Ffestiniog, more exposed to wind from the Irish Sea. The main cutting at Sunant reached depths of 40 feet in normal operation. The storm filled it with snow to within 6 feet of the rim. Surveyors estimated the drift at 34 feet deep and quarter-mile long. 70,000 cubic yards of snow. Maybe more. Quarry manager William Hughes looked at it and made a decision. The line was closed. Not for a day, not for a week. Closed until spring unless the weather changed. He was probably right. The Slate quarries couldn't stop. Bethesda Quarry employed 2,400 men. Penryn Quarry employed 1,800. Dinorwic employed 3,000. They worked year-round. Slate doesn't care about weather. Orders don't stop because of snow. Hughes needed to move product or his workers didn't get paid. The railway was blocked. Fine, they'd use trucks. Except the roads were worse than the railways. The A5 from Bethesda to Bangor was impassable by 10 a.m. Drifts across the roadway measured 12 to 15 feet in the mountain sections. Snowplows from the county council made 3 attempts to break through. 2 got stuck. 1 made it to Bethesda and couldn't get back. The A485 was closed. The before 409 was buried. Every farm track and mountain road in Snowdonia was cut off. By noon on November 23rd, 19 communities were isolated. Population 11,700 people. No road access, no rail access. Telegraph lines down in 42 locations. Telephone service out across Caernarfonshire and Merionethshire. The Royal Mail suspended delivery. Doctors couldn't reach patients. The Bethesda surgery had 3 emergency cases and no way to get them to hospital in Bangor. The storm kept falling. At Ffestiniog, Evans made a calculation. His 12 men were exhausted. They'd been shoveling for 6 hours and cleared maybe 600 feet of track. The cutting ahead was still blocked. Prince was burning coal in the shed. The next shift started at 2 p.m. He could double his crew to 24 men and work through the night, or he could let everyone rest and resume tomorrow. He chose the third option. Evans walked to the quarry offices and asked for volunteers. 60 men showed up. Slate workers, masons, splitters, men who handled rock for a living and knew how to move heavy things. Evans divided them into 3 crews, 8 hours per shift, continuous operation. They'd work the clock until the line opened or they ran out of men. The slate workers brought their own tools, picks designed for splitting rock, iron bars for prying, sledgehammers. They attacked the drifts like they were cutting a quarry face. Picks broke through the crust. Bars levered chunks loose. Shovels cleared the debris. It was faster. Not fast enough, but faster. By 6 p.m, they'd reached the far end of the first cutting. 800 yards cleared in 11 hours. Prince finally moved. Pritchard took her outlight. No wagons, just testing the track. She made it 300 yards before hitting a drift that stopped her cold. The crew spent 40 minutes digging her out. Pritchard back to the shed and waited. The narrow gauge lines had one advantage over the standard gauge: less snow to move. A 2-foot track required a clearance width of maybe 6 feet. Standard gauge needed 8 or 9. That difference mattered when every shovelful counted. But narrow gauge also meant smaller locomotives with less power to punch through drifts. The Great Western Railway could send a heavy engine with a plough and blast through moderate snow. The Ffestiniog engines weighed 14 tons and pushed maybe 5 tons on a good day. They had finesse, not force. This situation needed force. Evans contacted the Great Western office in Blaenau and requested assistance. Could they loan a plough? Could they send a crew? The Great Western had its own problems. The Cambrian coastline was blocked in 7 locations. The Conwy Valley line was closed. Ballard Junction was cut off. They had 3 ploughs working and 15 miles of block track. No help available. Evans expected that answer. He'd asked anyway. Protocol. On November 24th, the snow stopped. 43 hours after it started. Total accumulation at Blaenau Ffestiniog, 17 inches. At Bethesda, 21 inches. At Snowdon Summit, 39 inches. Wind had redistributed that snow into drifts measuring 6 feet on the low end, 30 feet where geography and bad luck converged. The clear skies brought 2 changes. First, temperatures dropped to 19 degrees Fahrenheit. The wet snow froze solid. Second, visibility improved. Crews could finally see the full scope of what they were digging through. It didn't help morale. The Ffestiniog Railway had 7 major blockages. The longest stretched for 900 yards. The deepest measured 13 feet on the tracks. Clearing them all would take days, maybe 2 weeks. The quarry was losing money every hour the line stayed closed. Evans had his volunteers, but volunteers got tired. They had jobs to return to, families. He needed a sustainable solution. He found it in rotation. Instead of working men to exhaustion, he split the effort into 4-hour shifts. Fresh crews every 4 hours. No one worked more than 8 hours in a 24-hour period. It was slower per shift but faster overall because the men stayed effective. A tired crew moved half as much snow as a fresh one. 4 hours of effective work beat 8 hours of diminishing returns. The system worked. By November 26th, 3 days after the storm ended, the Ffestiniog railway was open for limited service. 1 train per day, freight only. They ran it in daylight with a pilot crew checking track ahead of the locomotive. If they hit a drift, they stopped and cleared it before proceeding. The first run from Blaenau to Porthmadog took 6 hours instead of the usual 90 minutes, but it ran. The Penrhyn railway stayed closed. The Sunant cutting was beyond hand clearing. Hughes tried a different approach. He hired contractors from Bangor with mechanical excavators. It took them 9 days to cut a path through the drift. The excavators broke down twice. Hydraulic lines froze. One tipped over on the slope and required a crane to recover. When they finally broke through on December 4th, the railway ran 1 test train and discovered the track had shifted under the weight of the snow. Repairs took another week. Road access returned faster. The A5 opened November 27th. County ploughs worked around the clock and cleared the main routes by November 30th. Minor roads stayed closed until mid-December. Some farm tracks weren't passable until January. 3 families in the mountains near Capel Corrig remained cut off for 23 days. RAF helicopters from Valley dropped supplies twice. The families were fine, inconvenienced but fine. The economic impact was measured in lost productivity. The quarries operated at 40% capacity for 12 days. Slate exports dropped by 1,800 tonnes. The Ffestiniog Railway lost an estimated £700 in revenue. The Penrhyn Railway lost £1,200. The Great Western Railway estimated damages to infrastructure at £4,000. Insurance claims across Caernarfonshire totalled £96,000. No one died. That mattered more than money. The storm changed policy. By January 1952, every narrow-gauge railway in North Wales had revised its winter preparation schedule. Snow equipment deployed November 1st instead of December 1st. Track inspection started October 15th. Winter manning levels increased by 15%. The Great Western Railway installed additional snow fences along mountain sections and stockpiled extra coal at vulnerable locations. Griffith Evans kept working at Blaenau Ffestiniog until his retirement in 1963. He never saw another November storm like 1951, neither did anyone else. The meteorological records for North Wales show no comparable early-season snowfall in the 20th century.